Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Vets in Water, hosted by the California Water Environmental Association. We will spend an hour speaking with a panel of veterans who are in the front lines of California water. My name is Ashley Owens. I work with employment partners at Hire Heroes USA. For those of you who aren't familiar, Hire Heroes USA is a nonprofit that provides employment support to veterans, transitioning military members, and military spouses at no cost. And some of our most popular services include professional resumes for civilian and federal sectors, mentoring programs, and access to proprietary recruitment tools. And again, everything's at no cost for you. You can learn a little bit more by signing up at hireheroesusa.org, and we'll go ahead and add that link. If you're new here to Zoom, you can click the chat icon if you would like to communicate with other attendees or panelists. So go ahead and try it out right now. Let us know who you are and where you're from today so we can go ahead and become familiar with that interface. Now, since today we will have time for questions during the event, let's go ahead and get that going. We do ask that if you are going to ask the question, you use the Q&A icon, and that looks a little bit different at the bottom of your screen, so that we're able to communicate live as a group. And all of your panelists today will be able to communicate with you according to our backgrounds and expertise to provide that support. Now, we do have a fantastic moderator today. I am lucky enough to be able to introduce him. Jose Martinez is going to be our moderator. He is a US Navy veteran and currently the general manager of the Otay Water District. He served in the highly regulated utility industry for over 18 years, managing multi-million-dollar engineering and construction projects for water and wastewater facilities. Jose has now been with Otay since 2012, serving as a utility manager and assistant chief of operations, and now as the general manager. Prior to working at Otay, Jose oversaw and designed construction projects for SAIC Incorporated, and in the Navy, Jose served as a nuclear submarine officer. So you can see the transferability there. He has a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the US Naval Academy and holds a minor in Spanish. Jose initiated the AB 1588, and that creates pathways for veterans in California transitioning into civilian employment. This program allows veterans to receive credit for their military experience and education and apply it towards wastewater and water certifications. The bill was signed into law in late 2019, so we're all very thankful for your work in so many different endeavors. Thank you all for the veterans that are participating for your service. Now I'll hand it over to our event moderator, Jose Martinez.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ashley. I appreciate that. Well, it is my honor, and I want to thank CWEA for hosting this, which I think will be a good discussion with a good diverse group of veterans and water professionals. And I think it's fitting, obviously, we're doing this during the Water Professional Appreciation Week. So I do want to say I appreciate everybody here in this panel, and I know the discussions we've had even leading up to this, and I know the discussions we'll continue to have after. I do want to introduce real briefly who our panelists are. We have Rocky Padilla, the Mechanical Maintenance Superintendent with the City of San Jose. We also have Eric Hovland, Instrument Control Supervisor, also with the City of San Jose. Ted Lamb, Maintenance Superintendent with East Bay Municipal Utility District. And also Steve Twitchell, the Water Plant Supervisor, Valley Water. So with that, I know there's a lot more background introduction, so I figure the first question and the first way to kick it off is, I was going to ask each one of you, how did you find your way into the water industry from the military? Because that's something I've always found the most fascinating. We each tend to have a different story on how we got there, and most of us, it wasn't a very direct path. But that's not true for everybody. So maybe Rocky, can we start with you?
Sure, Jose, thank you. Rocky Padilla, U.S. Army, 1974-77. I separated in 77, enrolled into college, working jobs here and there. In the 80s, became a maintenance mechanic that would take me into my career. Then later, facing layoffs in 2005, living in Santa Cruz, took a drive to San Jose and drove by the San Jose wastewater plant. So I applied and and was hired as a mechanic. And I'm here today as a mechanical superintendent with the regional wastewater facility. And I feel it has taken me into my successful career.
All right, thank you very much, Rocky. And Eric, how about you?
My name is Eric Hovland. I'm the instrument control supervisor here at the City of San Jose wastewater facility. I was in the Navy for just about 10 years as an electronics technician. I worked on radar systems. After the military, I actually got out in '07 and I applied here in '08, but I never got a call back. So I went on to do a bunch of other things. I worked on underwater robots for oil and gas. I worked on biomedical machines for infectious disease. I've been around the gamut a little bit. And then I reapplied here when I saw another opening, and I came in here and as a wastewater attendant of all things. I didn't even come in as an instrument tech. And then I moved my way up, and after being here for just over 5 years, I'm now the supervisor here. So it was definitely a weird path, but here we are.
All right, thanks, Eric. And Ted?
Yeah, Ted Lamb, maintenance superintendent at East Bay Mud. I have the disciplines of mechanical, electrical, instrumentation, carpentry, and painting under my responsibilities now. After high school, the Army, GI Bill, college, civil engineer. Stayed in touch with a friend of mine who was a water resource guy in the civil engineering field. And while I went into the Coast Guard as an engineering officer, after a couple of tours, engineering and operations, I got out in the reserves. And then my friend Bill, who worked at East Bay Mud, said, hey, there's a first line supervisor opening. She just applied. So I applied in 2001, and after a couple of years, I got promoted to this position, the maintenance superintendent in 2006.
All right, thanks, Ted. And Steve?
Yeah, thank you. My career actually started more like when I was younger. My father worked for the State Water Resources Control Board, state of California. So water and wastewater was always in our lives to the point where we're visiting a wastewater treatment plant, and as a 11-year-old, looking at a secondary trickling filter looked like a big amusement ride. And so my father caught me on one of the arms, taking that around the trickling filter. So didn't come down with anything, but that's really kind of where it started. And then, I was interested in joining the service. And so when I went to the recruiters, I asked if there was anything in water and wastewater because I was a little bit familiar with it. And of course they do. And I was immediately brought in as a utility systems journeyman / specialist, specializing in water and wastewater. I did that for 6 years, 5 months, and 28 days. And once I got out there, I jumped into the wastewater plant up in Auburn, California. Loved it because I loved the career. And I've been progressively going from wastewater into the water industry, where I am now as the plant supervisor for the Rincontal water treatment plant, which is an 80 million gallon a day water treatment plant. And it's been a great ride.
Great, thanks a lot, Steve. So I think, as you can see, we've all kind of taken a kind of a different path to get to where we're at. So I think that kind of naturally segues into the why, right? So I'd be curious to get from the group, and maybe Ted, we can start with you, is, why do you think it is so difficult, and why we're having difficulty in getting people transitioning directly from the military, into the water industry?
I think a couple of reasons. One of which is a lot of people don't know about the water industry. And another reason is it's a very thorough it's a pretty long vetting process for applicants here at my agency, for example. So you need someone to kind of inside the agency to kind of walk you through it, in my experience. And then I think a lot of veterans are, just don't like to hurry up and wait for that phone call. So I think those are some of the reasons.
Rocky, what about you? What do you think?
Well, in the water and wastewater industry, in my time, it never existed. It took me a lot of years almost a lifetime to understand how important the service of water and wastewater and how gratifying my career has been. The biggest obstacle is that was in front of me was that there wasn't any education, anything that directed me to this field. But today, I think it's moving in that direction. It's open, and it's educating the young generation in the values of water and wastewater and the careers that can follow that knowledge. In the 3 years in the service, again, never heard anything about wastewater careers. And now working with organizations like Bayworks, CWEA, and many other agencies, knowing the importance of directing men and women in the career of water and wastewater.
Thanks, Rocky. And Eric, I think you tried, right? I think your story is you tried to go directly from the military into the water industry.
Yeah, I think part of the hardest thing is, well, during that time at least, was just convincing somebody that my skills in the military translated to water. And then there's also the opposite side, which is first I had to convince myself that my skills translated, So I think there's a huge thing with military personnel. If it's not exactly the same name, right, and the same description as what we did in the military, it's kind of rough to, it almost feels like you're lying when you fill out the application that, like, the radar heat exchanger is just like, the wastewater heat exchanger. Even though they have the same name, it's like you don't feel like, unless it's identical sometimes. But yeah, I applied and nobody called me. But when I came back, I had to come in through a different door, but we still made it here. So.
And Steve, what about you?
Well, my transition obviously was pretty linear since that was my specialty in the service. But being in the industry now, going in, including my military career, 33 years, I have seen the difficulties for number one, getting operators and control techs and stuff like that. Just because the industry is not really known, it's not out there, it's not being. It is nowadays with Bayworks and stuff like that, like Rocky said, but and that's what we're dealing with is folks, trying to get some younger folks in, since we're all retiring or eventually going to retire, is getting these skilled folks in to fill these positions. And that's what, outreach does. And it's get people knowledgeable that, hey, there is a career. I mean, a career, not a job, but a career in this industry. And that's pretty exciting. And hopefully we can get some young generation in here.
Yeah, I'll tell you, for me, I went through school, got education, and just the water industry in general. I think a lot of society and a lot of the public doesn't understand the industry and doesn't understand the complexity. So even for me with my engineering background, I got hired into a consulting firm for the utility side. It was really for the power. That was where I was going to go in. I just happened to start working on water projects. And it opened my eyes. It blew me away, the complexity with treatment and conveyance and maintenance. I had no idea, right? I was one of those ignorant people that, you turn on the water and it's there, and how hard can it be? So I didn't even know that there was a true career in water. I think one of the other things that I remember we talked about before is, I think we've looked at it also, there's kind of 3 areas, which is, it's educating veterans about that there's this great career in water. I mean, it really is a great, promising, rewarding career. There's educating the water industry on the pool of veterans. And I think one of the other things is as simple as lingo. How do you translate? I think Eric had brought up like the heat, to say that the heat exchanger in the radar system is no different than the heat exchanger at any, treatment plant or other, process. And then you can do both. And what we're also seeing is, and I think maybe it was Ted, you talked about it, is the roadblocks with certification, and saying you have a veteran that wants to go in the industry, you have an industry that wants a veteran, but maybe they just don't have the certifications. And, so that's what I've kind of also seen as some of the roadblocks. And so hopefully as we continue to discuss, we can talk about maybe some best practices. I thought, maybe Ted, you can talk about, what the East Bay Municipal Water District, what the hiring process is like for your agency.
Yeah, so we have about hundreds of classification titles, and so what happens is when a department expects openings or have an opening, so we work with recruitment, HR, and say, hey, this is the updated class description and duty we posted. And what people may not realize is a title like instrument technician is going to be a list that's up for that'll be active for 24 months, and every department that has instrument technicians could use it. So it's not one opening; it could be a dozen opening, depending on people's plans of staying here or going. And so the application is it's a reading test, basically. I say you got to read what they're asking for, minimum qualifications, and the ideal candidate. That portion is very important, the ideal extra skills. So follow those directions, and there are timelines involved. And I think that's the first major hurdle I've seen for everyone, not just veterans.
What about you, Eric, for City of San Jose?
I am actually working on this process right now because I need 2 more people here. So I looked over the test. So we have a written test, and then we have interviews, and then we do a practical test here. So I'm actually adding things to both. I added to the written test already, but I'm adding to the practical to include more PLC workers and or people who work on PLCs, excuse me, because we already have a lot of instrumentation practical stuff. I think the hard part is just finding the places to post that we have this job. Because I know the last 2 times we did it, we maybe had like 30 people apply, and we filtered out about over half of them on just testing. So I think it's just getting the word out there, especially to veterans. We had no veterans apply the last 2 cycles. So
Yeah, and I think something that came up in our pre-discussions leading up to this was that was new to me, was realizing that there's a lot of groups of veterans on social media, that there's actual social media, Facebook groups, and that these jobs and this knowledge is being shared within, depending on what your rating or MOS was and specialty was. There's whole work groups. So even I wasn't aware of that. And so I think probably that comment's more for hiring managers and supervisors, that that's another pool we've recently learned is a good place to plug for veterans. I know we had a couple questions that actually I think segues good into one of the questions that we had is, outside of the blanket talking points of supervisory and leadership experience, what attributes can or should be highlighted by former NCOs, petty officers, or anybody in field operations positions? And so I think that segues well into, so what advice do you have for veterans to highlight? So again, that we understand the leadership. And when we say that, I do want to address something to military veterans. Don't just assume that people know about your leadership and supervisory skills, because I can tell you firsthand, I don't think in the water industry, unless you understand the leadership and supervisory skills that are even done, even if you're not a non-commissioned officer, even if you're an E4, I mean, the military really does put people in leadership positions early on, even in their first tour of duty, whatever it is. So don't underestimate that. And so you won't sound like a broken record. My advice for veterans is still highlight that, and then highlight that with, whatever your specialty is going to be technical. But going back to, things, what advice would you have? What other advice would you have? And Rocky, maybe I thought if you had any advice for veterans, what they can do when they're going through the application process to help them out.
So on the application process, I would suggest seek information about the location in the organization. Know a little bit about where you're going, where you want to be. Get in touch with organizations like Baywork. For instance, Baywork, the veterans page, it has a lot of good vital information in there. It has a lot of resources. It also has connections with hiring managers. You're looking at one right now, Ted Lamb. So there's some good information there. And then also, you know, the Bayworks has information or knowledge with the people that are a part of the organization that have knowledge of the current local trend of hiring, you know. Some good questions that may be asked, where to go to resource that. And looking back on your experience before, during, and after the military, comparing the obvious similarities before you go into and applying for a position. And most of all, knowing that you are a huge part of the safety and well-being of everything in the world. I mean, water and wastewater, you can't, there's really nothing in front of those that we need in this world. So very important.
Steve, what about you? What advice would you have?
Well, I think Rocky hit it right on the head. And being a veteran, and it really doesn't really matter if you're in your MOU or what you were in the service. It can directly translate. You could be in services. You could be in whatever MOU. But the military builds you up and to make you a strong leader, and that translates over to this industry. Directly and indirectly. And so for the hiring process, kind of go back to the previous question, we number one, we ask if you're a veteran on your application. And, as a control system, to be a control system technician, there's a written and a physical test. Operations, it's all written. And, it, again, like going backward, it translates over. And so to be an operator, we hire apprentice operators with no certifications, and we work to get you your certifications. So you don't have to be in the water and wastewater industry in the service, but if you're interested, in Valley Works or Valley Water's interest, it's better to bring somebody in without a certification to get their certification, train them, and we want to mess them up our way, but we want to build them up, to be a good water or treated water operator, as well as control system tech system maintenance and stuff like that. The Apprentice Program here is pretty dynamic, but you don't have to have really a lot of that background. You have to have some, but not a lot of that background to be able to achieve a goal of obtaining a position here at Valley Water. So, but going in back, filling out the employment applications, just be true to yourself. Be true to what you know, and then relay that information during the hiring interview.
Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm sorry, I was answering questions in the.
No, just anything to add to maybe what Steve said on what veterans can do as they're going through the application process.
No, just like he was saying, you just have to know the system and kind of work it while you're doing it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of, you can't really contact us when you're in the application process. So there's no way for us to offer guidance on that once you've applied,
Yeah. Ted, oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. So, our agency is a little bit different. There's a number you can call. The actual analyst who's posted that recruitment can answer your questions. And if you hey, does my experience in the military apply? I've done this, done this, and they'll give you some advice. And also, I've worked with our recruitment division a lot, and actually, I've been given the go-ahead to talk to anyone interested and help them, sort of coach them to what to put and what not to put on their application. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think something, and maybe Rocky had mentioned it earlier, was, so there should be no hesitation for anybody that's interested, for veterans or active duty that are looking at transitioning, to call, just cold call an agency, right? I've had that happen, a couple times where they heard something in the news about our agency, Otay Water, and so they called and said, who can I talk to about a career? And so they'll forward the call to me. So feel free to do that. And I know CWEA, if you call them, they'll put you in touch with people. I know at the national level of AWWA, they do the same thing. They will put you in contact with somebody that can help you, mentor you and say, well, they ask you about themselves and you say, well, let me give you some guidance. Let me help you translate. There's a bunch of us that myself, in the California, Nevada section of AWW, we do the same thing. So really, veterans shouldn't be reluctant to actually call agencies, call these organizations and say, is there somebody I can speak to? Even if you're not actually applying, you're just wanting to learn about the career in water. Is there anything, can be done? Ted?
Yeah, before I forget, so there was a couple questions about, someone with a translation background and someone graduating shortly with environmental health degree. So get into the wastewater industry, if even with what you think is a different MOS than what the job applications or skill sets looking for, you should talk to someone like in the agency, because in the military, we do a lot and we just think about it. We've been asked to do many technical things outside of our job description. And I think talking to someone in HR or someone who is a veteran in that agency will kind of narrow your focus and help you out with that initial application.
Yeah, and actually also I think what's helpful is if you are already applying, just pulling out the job description, looking at the language and the term that's being used. It's not magic, HR and that list. These are the skill sets we want. And that's the terminology they're going to look for. And so look at that job description and see, is that comparable to what I did? Then use that terminology, use that lingo in your application, use that in your interview, use that terminology. Because even between military and civilian, every agency may do things a little different. A position at Otay Water, maybe overlaps with the position, at San Jose or at East Bay Mud. And so that's why I would also recommend you look at that job description, look at terminology and things, and use that. Eric?
Along with that terminology, don't be afraid if it's just somewhat similar, because a lot of times we, at least in the military, we call it, you nuke it out. You're like, you basically overthink the fact that, this, pressure, bulb is different than the, pressure systems that I worked on, or whatever it is. If it's even similar, you should look into the fact that it's even close, because it's probably the same thing you've been doing in the military. It's just they're using different wordings, because of the industry. Like the way it's worded in this industry is different than the way we word it in the military. So if you feel like it's even similar as a veteran who's applying, you should dig into that, because it's probably you. You should be applying,
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, I just want to build upon that. And speaking for Valley Water, I mean, we're not just in the water industry, but we're also in the environmental industry. And so, like in the service, it's very, very broad. So even if you're, in the service, you were a heavy excavator, or you were a heavy equipment operator, that translates into the water industry for Valley Water. If you were an environmental engineer, civil engineer, electrical engineer, all that can go into the water industry. We're not just talking about water operations, control systems technicians, or maintenance. It's so broad, it's ridiculous. And to build on what Eric was saying is, yeah, if the terminology is different. I know when I was applying, getting out, I was kind of looking at my MOS, looking at them like, well, it looks the same, but there's these little differences that might throw a veteran off, and but not to be afraid to put yourself out there. And again, I think it was Ted was saying, or someone was saying, reach out to the recruitment rep, or whatever you call it, whatever agency. Do your research, and you'd be surprised how much translations over to this industry and the civilian from military. So.
And Steve, I think you also hit on a good point. Most of us here are all very technical. That tends to be some of the harder things to recruit for and define are technical. But the water industry is a business. We have accountants, we have HR reps, we have everything that any other organization would have. And so while I know our focus tends to be a little more technical, don't, again, regardless of what your MOS and rating was, there's going to be overlap. There's a lot of positions out there within the water industry. So, I think that was a good point. I was thinking we'd move on to, I think, another good topic that we had talked about, which is, so for those veterans, how do you think, why do you think the water industry is attractive for somebody? Why should somebody that has a military background transition to the water industry? What are some of the benefits or similarities? And I don't know if maybe Ted, we can start with you.
Yeah, so one of my friends here as superintendent says, maintaining a water system's like fixing a car while it's being driven. So if that sounds like your experience in the military, I think you want to be in the water industry. So the system has to run 24/7, but parts of it needs to be worked on all the time. So there's a lot of value on people with initiative, judgment, and the technical skills and quick learning. So sounds like everything I know in the military. So just need to get your first job here. It's a very satisfying experience.
Rocky.
Jose, okay, I was doing something else here. So as far as the transition, you know what? When I got out of high school, I didn't know what I was going to do. So you know what? I didn't have any idea. So the experience I gained in the military, leadership, teamwork, values of being a human being. I was a soldier. I wasn't wastewater. I wasn't clean water. I didn't have any experience in that. What did it give me? It gave me everything that made me what I am today. Without the challenges and values, an employer could not have a better employee. So hire a vet.
And, Eric.
Working for the wastewater industry, kind of building up on what Ted was saying, is that, every ship I was ever on was older, and we were repairing failing infrastructure all the time. And that still has to be able to, do its tour out to sea and maintain, everything that has to be maintained at the same time. So it is just like repairing a ship while it's underway, or a car while it's moving, I think, but the other things that this industry offers is it gives you purpose again, because a lot of times we get out of the military, we have this purpose, and then we kind of flounder around to different jobs because we don't know really like where to go or what to do. But you'll see in this industry, we're basically keeping people healthy, and it's more than important what we do, even though nobody knows we exist, which is just like the military. Nobody really wants to see you on the front lines or see what you're doing, but you're there and you're doing it every day. So I think that purpose is super important, and even though it's not as rigid as the military, there is structure here. You still have chain of command, and you have responsibilities, and we still answer to, like, I know in the instrument control department, we answer to all the, the certification boards and BACWA and EPA and, and you name it, we answer to them still here, which is a lot of what we did in the military too. So there's a lot of similarities that translate, and they're easier, and I don't know, easier is the right word, but it's lighter going than how rigid the military was for structure, and,
Yeah, and Ted?
Yeah, so I think Eric was saying that, the structure is great, but there's a lot of freedom in the wastewater industry. You can apply all those great lessons you learned in the military without the rigidness that the command structure gives you. And it's just that smaller team environment that I foster. It feels so good.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, Ted, that, at least in the Navy, and I would imagine this is true for a lot of the military, there's kind of, you have to do this for a certain amount of time, checkbox. It's a lot more fluid in our industry. And so if, you're doing well and you enjoy something, you can transition and, cross from one discipline if there's overlap to another. And you don't have to go follow a set way or just go by, you know, seniority. Oh, you're not in that year group yet, so you can't do that. So, Steve, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to build upon that. You know, working in water, and you know, Eric hit it right on the head. Yeah, we do have a lot of regulators. We have a lot of regulations. You know, for my plant, I feed water to over 1 million people daily, and so it is very structured. And I believe Ted said, but it is very fluid. Or you might have said it was very fluid. Yeah, it's very close to being the service without being yelled at. And one thing about the veterans, I know that most veterans, they take pride in what they do, and you know that means a lot in this industry. I find that when someone takes pride in what they do, and it could be the minusculous thing or it could be the most integrated thing, but once they take pride in what they do, that is shown on their day-to-day results. And I know I have several military folks here that had no experience, and they transitioned over, and you can see just what, you know, we might have had the boringest day at water treatment, but they still go home with their head held high that they've achieved something, and that is to support not only the environment but to support the lives and the health of over 1 million people that consume our product, and that is something to be very proud of.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as corny as it sounds, but that's even before I started working here in the public, when I did consulting for the water utilities, I was still proud to say, oh, okay, that pipeline, that pump station, I mean, that's for the community, and that's not for some remote thing. You know, you're usually working in the very same region you live. And so the work you do benefits. I think that was an advantage over the military. You know, sometimes you're stationed very far away and you don't see how what you're doing impacts something else around the world. But here, what we do, we see the faces of the people we serve, the community we serve. I find that rewarding. You know, I mean, it sounds corny, but you know, that's our community. You know, so anyway, I think that's a good translation. Anybody have anything else on that? Well, switching perspectives, I would say what resources, and it's kind of the question I was going to pose, what resources do you feel the water sector needs to develop for veterans, kind of in your experience? Because again, we're definitely not there, and that's one of the reasons we're having this webinar, is to, you know, identify what resources are there, but I think what we can continue to do and resources we can have to help out veterans or to help out the water industry, you know. And I don't know if maybe Eric, you want to start us off on that?
Like you were saying earlier, I just barely found out that Facebook has these veterans job boards that they, you know, so I really was off of Facebook completely, but I got back on. I've been really like active, and they're actually posted this webinar in there, and you know, I don't know if anybody is there from here from that, but I think even, you know, veterans need to look into it more, but I think we need to reach out more, you know, because I don't think there is enough posted anywhere, or, you know, like there's not enough like consolidated job boards for veterans, I guess is my problem. Is, you know, there's all these job boards for every job, but I would like to see more, you know, veteran related things in veteran places that veterans look at, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges we've been seeing as an industry is, yeah, there really isn't a consolidated. I mean, we're trying to do it either, you know, through Baywork, through the, you know, San Diego region, but that's us as an industry. That isn't necessarily when I was getting out and when you were all getting out, there wasn't a single spot. There was if you only wanted to work in the defense related industry. So if you were going to go work for Raytheon and, you know, Lockheed and those, there was kind of a consolidated big website, but that again was very industry specific to that industry. There's not really one place, and it's very fragmented. It's a lot of good resources, but I agree. I think that's still one of our challenges, and I think that's where, you know, organizations like CWEA and even, you know, AWWA is maybe try to pull that together and try to have a consolidated resource. Ted, did you have any thoughts on the resources?
Yeah, I think it's more of a challenge on the agency side. I think that we've lost a lot of veterans at our agencies from years ago who were, there was more veterans in my agency when I came on board, and that was 19 years ago. So there's this disconnect between the employer and what veterans can provide as a resource. So, example, as superintendent who does hiring and does apprenticeship programs with Steve Curry here, I understood that we were going to do an apprenticeship program with a local junior college. So we have this legal agreement where we look at the qualifications of the students at this junior college. So I knew that there were other qualified folks out there at junior college, didn't have those many units at that junior college, but they had certification from the military. So I worked with Stephen to write in a military certification in there to qualify them to be selected as an intern. So those are the things that that you need someone in your agency who have the experience, who can advocate when these opportunity comes up and say, hey, you know, you should look at this. Don't make it as narrow as you've done in the past. Open it up a little. It's not a less qualification, it's equivalent.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. I think kind of along those lines, I think one of the things that I got from, I remember it was a webinar like about a year or two ago, that was a best practice that some agency had employed that I think is a really good practice, is most agencies, whether they realize it or not, have veterans that work for them. And you'd be surprised. I mean, even here, there's people I've been working with for years, and I come to find out, oh yeah, they were infantry in the Marine Corps, and then I find out their story and how they made it here. But with that, we, at least at our agency and a lot of agencies down here, there's usually when you're out applying, there's a box that says, were you a military veteran? And you check the box, yes or no. One of the best practices we've seen that's helped is those pool of applications, we kind of set aside, and we have asked other veterans in the organization to go through it, maybe have them help translate it. So regardless whether it may be somebody that was in a different part of the Navy or a different branch of service, most veterans can kind of help out the hiring manager. And so that's something that, water agencies may want to consider is, hey, is there a veteran that we can have take a look at these pool of applications, and maybe they can help us translate. Maybe they can give us and say, where do these fall in? Are these more on the A pile, B pile, C pile? Steve, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, that brings up a good point. For Valley Water, I'm actually the president of the Veterans ERG, and so I noticed when I went in the application process for Valley Water, used to be Santa Clara Valley Water District. Yes, there was a little box there. There's two boxes. Are you a veteran? Are you currently enrolled in service in the military? And I checked the veteran little button because it was electronic. And then I asked myself, well, what does that do? So several years into this, I became the active in the ERG. So I went to HR and I asked that question: what does that little box do when you click it? And I got the does in the headlight eyes, and I was like, well, is there any merit to it? Why is that there? And I got that question that you hate to hear. Well, it's always been there. What does that mean? And so I've been working hard at this agency to say, okay, let's give it some, let's give it merit. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be put to the top of the list, but let's get you into let's say a ready pile. Let's get you that person into the mix, because like I said previously, there is a lot of merit and pride, honor, and stuff that comes from veterans into the civilian career. And so, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but right now we're working on having that make a difference for veterans when they click that box. And so that's pretty exciting. That's a change anyway.
Yeah. Anything else anybody wants to add on resources?
Sure. I'd like to mention the recognition that we're all putting out to the veterans to hopefully let them realize that, we're here to help them, and we want to hopefully direct them in the water and wastewater and put them on a career. And that this webinar today is about veterans, about what we do and how we do it. So I hope they all hear this, and if not, just like all the panelists have mentioned, they've talked to somebody that's a veteran, and they talk to somebody that's a veteran, and that chain just goes on, and we get out as much as we can.
Yeah, Rocky, I think you had talked about, did you already talk about it, about coming up with a set of questions that, that can, because sometimes I think even the questions that we ask sometimes filter out veterans.
Well, there's a couple of things we need to do. The questions were, those were coming from Ted Lamb, his organization, his HR department that he was working with, and that's one of the items that's very important on our list, is to be able to recognize, especially the signatories that are part of Baywork right now, to hopefully work with them and start incorporating some of these things in there. The MOS translator, working with them on what is a 92 whiskey mean, and is it the same as a wastewater? Yes, it is. But not knowing those things, an organization like Baywork, again, how much the group itself, the veterans group, are working together to try to make it as clear and as easy as possible to a lot of veterans that want to come and seek that help that we can give to them. AWEA, AWWA, all these organizations that can help these veterans, they just need to reach out. They need to be a part of what we're trying to do, is help another veteran.
Yeah, and anybody have anything else you want to share? Resources? One thing I was looking at my notes that I think we talked about earlier, and I think there was a question on this, is another thing I've seen with veterans, and again, I'll just use myself, is I felt a little, when I was transitioning, a little insecurity on, like, I don't know if I'm qualified for this job. I'm going to tell you, everybody here on this panel, we're all hiring managers, supervisors, right? So we'll let us determine whether you're qualified or not, right? So on your application, and I think maybe Eric or Steve had said it, be honest what your experience is and but apply. Go through. Don't worry about saying, well, what if I get, I actually had a fear that what if I get through and I get hired and I'm not what they thought I was going to be. Our HR process and weeds that out. We know whether you're qualified and whether you're the right candidate for the job, but never let that deter you from applying. Like I said, that'll be our job. But you should always think, if it's something you want to do, if it's a job that you think. I think another resource that we haven't touched on too much is, and there's been a few questions in the chat, is, well, I have this background, it doesn't really have a lot. Maybe I was infantry and I felt like it doesn't have a lot right off the bat for maybe something you want to do specifically in the water industry. But there's a lot of education organizations out there. And I know down here in the San Diego South region, we have a community college, Cuyamaca College. They have a whole center for kind of water studies that helps anybody that wants to get in the water industry. But then they have a whole special segment that goes into veterans that also want to transition to the water industry. And so I remember talking to Marine infantry, and that's what he was doing. He's taking courses at the community college. So that's another good resource. Reach out to those educational institutions, and some of them do actually have specific associates programs in water that, so let's say your job may have some overlap, but you specifically want to go into a technical job. There's pathways and there's resources for that. So I don't want, again, discourage somebody that wants to get in the water industry with that. So I don't know, does anybody have anything else to say maybe on some education? I'm not as familiar with some of the North, and I think before we started, either Ted or anybody to chime in on some of the educational resources that are out there.
So our bread and butter is operations, all right? Operations, like distribution operators, or wastewater operators, treatment operators, and a lot of the education resources you can do on your own right now through the state. You get your D1, D2, T2, T1, T2. You can do it on your time, and that just emphasize your application goes higher, that you've already done some of the initial easier certification.
Steve, I think you had.
Yeah, I had, and there's also a lot of, community colleges that now are offering, throughout the country that offering water, wastewater classes, not only water and wastewater, but collection and some distribution, as well as, control tech and maintenance. So that's pretty exciting. That wasn't available. I know in California, the only thing that was available was the King Curry courses when I was going through Professor Curry, and that was it. Now, we like I said earlier, we partnered up with a local community college for internships, and we're looking to expand that not only to students but like to for veterans as well. And I can't remember the panelist that is also doing that. I think it was Ted and their organization. But that's exciting, not just to get young students, but to get young and middle and older veterans to get into this field. So community colleges are starting to step up.
Jose, just to everyone out there, be clear that the water industry, it covers a wide variety of trades. It's not just an operator. It's a heavy equipment operator. It's a mechanic. It's a lab. It's engineering. It's instrumentation. I mean, I could go on. The fields, they're plentiful. There's a lot of openings in all those fields. So don't feel like it's just one avenue. You have a big selection of where you want to go.
Yeah, I think something between what you talked about and I think maybe Ted was talking about that came to my mind is that's also new is some of the other disciplines that maybe either require or have a desired certification. So when you see that in a job description, look it up. And so I would encourage veterans to look it up, or even employers to look at it, because some of those certifications, either through CWEA, they do give credit toward some of that. I think through CWEA, there's the plant maintenance grade, and there's a couple other things. But some of these organizations and certifying bodies recognize military credit, and they're giving credit. So I would encourage veterans to look that up. We had SCADA technicians who went through the I forget what it stands for, CCST, the controlled system. There's a certification there. And they were able to take, in order to take the test, you have to have so many years of experience. Well, they were able to apply their military experience toward being able to take the test and get that certification. They still have to take a test, but a lot of times these certifications also require years of experience. And so I would also encourage water agencies to look that up. And veterans themselves to look up at these different certifying bodies, what experience credit they're going to get. And there's actually a question on certification that was asked specifically about Assembly Bill 1588, and that's the one that now mandates that the state do apply and give credit for veterans or their military experience toward education experience credits toward water and wastewater certifications. And you want to know what the timeline was. So the bill just got signed in. What happens is the State Water Resource Control Board needs time to develop regulations and kind of how to map out and how to determine, okay, so you worked on an aircraft carrier and you were repairing pumps and motors, you did that for X amount of years, how much credit is that being given? There's already a model. It's being done from state to state. So if you have a certification in one state and you come to another, there's experience and reciprocity given. They're just trying to now have to develop that with the military. So they've got to develop that, but that's what the law mandates that they shall do this stuff. So they're going to develop those, and once they have that. But I would still encourage, if you're looking for that, call the State Water Resource Control Board and ask them, hey, I'm applying, how can I get? And I can also encourage that the more calls that they get, it'll help them to, as they promulgate these regulations, to how to do it in a way that's most effective to give people credit. I think it was either Eric, I think you had your hand up on something.
I was just going to go to what you were saying about the CCST. So while we don't require that here to be hot-aired, we do require you to have the CCST to go above level 2. And we have 4 levels here. So if you don't have the CCST, you can't, level 1 CCST, you can't go above level 2 here as an instrument control technician. And if you had it when you applied, I can put you much higher you know, if you got the job, you would be in a much higher level than anybody who doesn't have it. So.
And we don't have it much, but we had something similar. We hired a machinist mate off a aircraft carrier. They did spend some time after they transitioned out. They got a degree. They got some of their education and got a degree. But the degree was in, I forgot what school it was. It may have been through Thomas Edison, but it was nuclear technologist. And they were applying for what we would call a pump mechanic. And I can tell you that had they not checked the box that they were military, their application and said, well, we don't think it exactly translates. I happen to be in the Navy. I knew what a machinist mate does. And these are the guys that tear apart the motors, you know, go through the gaskets, the seals, get them back up and running. And so I knew this person has the skill set. And so we've hired them. They were at a position that didn't require certification. But then since then, they've been able to take their military experience, apply for the test, and now get that, I think it's a plant maintenance grade through CWEA, and so that they can now promote and advance in their position. So kind of I think to Eric's point. We're getting close. So I think it looks like our answer box has been answered, but I want to give everybody just another couple minutes. Alec, I thought maybe I know you've been sharing some of the resources and the links. Do you have a screen or something you wanted to share just to show as we're closing up with some of the resources that are out there and available?
Jose, I don't, but I'll drop all those links into the chat right now. We've got the 2 conferences, and the conferences, if you are a student, the conferences are great to attend and they're free. And the best thing in our industry is networking. You ask a water or wastewater professional to help you, and they are most likely to give you a hand. Just ask. And take a tour. Take a tour. It's a good way to get started.
Yeah. I do want to start wrapping up. I do really want to thank all the panelists. I'm going to ask you if there's any final words that you would like to share with our last 2 minutes. So as you're thinking about that, again, I really appreciate this dialogue and discussion. I think, you know, this is really the best way is talk, and I'd encourage HR departments, I'd encourage industry and veterans to reach out to veterans, reach out to the water industry. We want to add the talented pool of veterans to our hiring pool. You know, and that's really what we want to do. As a water agency, as any hiring manager, you want to hire the best. And the way you do that is you increase the talent pool. The bigger talent pool, you get to pick even more from the best. And to add veterans to that talent pool, I think is a win. And as a veteran, we're all biased that we want to, you know, we know what attributes, what skill sets they have, and we would be excited to continue to work in that kind of environment. So Rocky, you have any final thoughts?
Yes, I just want to let everybody know again that I'm proud to be a part of this. And again, I'm here to do any supporting or any help that I can give with my hands or the people that are behind me, and that's Baywork and the people that you see on the screen. So please reach out to us and choose water, wastewater, choose something. But look at this field, look at what it offers, and look at the people that you're going to be working with. Thank you.
All right, Eric, how about you?
Yeah, just the same thing. We're here for you guys. If you need to call us, or I guess I actually kind of like that idea that Ted did, and he put his number and everything in the chat. But yeah, I'm available. I can, as long as I'm sitting at my desk, or you could email me, or, you know, I'll answer questions, tours if there's still a thing, because, you know, COVID, but you know, I'm more than happy to show you what we're doing here. This facility is under an immense amount of construction, so we're rehabbing, you know, as Ted said, we're taking the engine out as the car's moving down the road right now. So there's a lot to see here. You can actually see the in-ground work, which is an insane thing to see. Like, but yeah, so yeah, I'm available and hope veterans apply.
All right, Ted?
Yeah, so the greatest thing I took away from the military is the fellowship and to be able to rely on the person next to you and around you. So I want to give back. If you have any questions, just contact me.
All right. Steve?
I just put my email address out there for everybody. Same thing. You know, if you're interested in getting certified in the state of California and or the state of Nevada, where I'm also certified, just let me know. I can help you out in water, wastewater distribution or collections. And yeah, please, veterans, apply for these jobs. We'd love to have you in the workforce.
Yeah, I know she had to step off, but I do also want to thank Ashley and Hire Heroes USA. So their link is in the chat. You know, they're also just a great resource partnership. Last couple plugs, you know, there's online translators out there, Cool, C-O-O-L, I think that link's in the chat. My Next Move, those help translate MOS and ratings with civilian water jobs and vice versa. And also there's, look it up, there's what's called a Skill Bridge program, which actually does internships for people that are getting out of the military that at really no cost to the agency. You can get a military veteran work at your agency for their last remaining, you know, I think it's up to 6 months. So again, that's through the Department of Defense. It's called the Skill Bridge program. There's a lot of things going on. So reach out to us. There's more to talk about, more than what we can fit in 1 hour. But I do want to thank everybody. Thank for your service to the community in the water industry. Again, Water Professionals Appreciation Week. I know we appreciate everybody's work here. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great job. Take care.